Alright, good day, class. I am recording this lecture video for our discussion of lesson 1 of unit 3. This time we are going to be talking about functions of communication. Our first lesson will be discussing regulation or control and social interaction. So with this, we are able to understand how we are able, or what are the different characteristics functioning in the functions of communication, whereas there are regulation or control and social interaction. So this is mostly going to dive into the day-to-day interactions that we have with people and how regulation or control is going to be used, in order for us to be able to attain the ideals and the necessary desires or expectations when we talk about regulating and controlling, as well as how we are able to communicate efficiently with our people in the social cluster that we have. So firstly, I would like to identify the learning objectives of our lesson. We are going to determine and explain the functions of communication in this context, regulation or control, and social interaction. And we are going to differentiate verbal cues from nonverbal cues. Okay. So for this lesson class, how do control and social interaction differ from each other? This is the essential question that we are going to anchor, our discussion into, so that we are able to understand how does control and social interaction differ and collaborate from each other and with each other. Okay. So first, let's try to determine what is communication. Before we discussed, communication is a process wherein there is a sending and receiving of a particular message or information that is decoded, that is encoded and then later on decoded. Upon decoding, we are able to understand that a receiver gives the response or the feedback to the sender, which now creates the communication process, and that it hinders or it has barriers which we identify as noises that disrupt, the process of communication. So for this, we are going to talk about how regulation or control and social interaction are defined and are distinguished from one another. So for one, regulation or control and social interaction are functions of communication that are used by individuals based on different situations that they are in. Meaning to say, these are functions of communications that we may use, as individuals based on the different situations that we are in. Okay, let's try to look at this context or this concept. Communication is used to regulate or control the pace and flow of conversations or the speaking of a participant so that interruptions and awkward silences between speakers are avoided. Right? So in order for us to determine whether or not communication helps to, or communication is regulated by the way or the regulating the pace and the flow of our conversation or the speaking, we will be able to understand, how this becomes helpful in the process of communication. Okay. So in continuation, sabi nga dito, communication is used, to regulate or control the pace and the flow of our conversation, as well as the speaking of a participant so that interruptions and awkward silences between the speakers are avoided. Mawala bitaw ng mga ah oo kanang yun ana ng mga interrupters, we are able to avoid that, or we are able to eliminate that with how we regulate the pace and the flow of our conversations. Okay, now let's go back and take a look at verbal and nonverbal communicate or nonverbal cues. Verbal cues are those that we are uttering, yung mga sinasabi natin. Example, that's it, and thank you. Yeah, and well, is that clear? Do you follow? Right? These are verbal cues. These are the ones that we say. Okay. While non-verbal cues, okay, here's an example of using verbal cues. The conversation between Hannah and Clyde. Hey, Clyde, are you busy? I just want to ask for advice. Yeah, go on. I listen. I have a friend who is younger than I am. I am like his older sister. I found out that he has not been studying lately and failed in one of his classes. Uh-huh, go on. He said that he was helping his grandmother sell vegetables in the market and he has no time to study at home. What should I tell him? Well, you can tell him that he should make time to study at home. Studying is important. It will help him get a good job in the future and eventually help his grandmother. You know what? I have an idea. We can all have a study time together. We just need to set aside a few minutes after school to do that. Thank you, Clyde. I agree with you. That would really help. So in this particular example class, we can see that there are underlined, verbal cues wherein we use to try to emphasize what we are trying to how we are trying to respond, not to the message that is being given to us or being communicated to us. So, for example, in the first sentence, are you busy? I just want to ask for advice. Yeah, go on. I listen. So the verbal cue that is used here is giving affirmation that he is not busy. Instead, he is listening to the need for an advice by Hannah. Okay. And then the utterance of this expression, meaning to say he or she or Clyde is understanding or trying to understand, what Hannah is trying to convey. Okay, with the scenario that he has given. So these verbal cues are used actually when we are trying to give affirmations, when we are trying to give confirmations or clarifications to the conversation that we are having. All right. So that is now what we call regulation or control. In the conversation that we have, we are trying to showcase how we are showing that we understand and we are listening, that we are interested, and we are, kumbaga, our intention is really to have that conversation or to not have that conversation. Well, verbal cues, as I've said, are used to mark how we are able to kada bitaw emphasize, how we try to affirm or how we try to express the essence or how we are trying to express the message that we are trying to convey. Okay, so that makes the communication process complete in a way that it supplements the conversation that the two of you or the group is making. Okay, here are examples of nonverbal cues, and these are very useful, class, especially when we become the speakers or the listeners, because when we use nonverbal cues, it is also interpreted by the persons that we are communicating with. It is also interpreted as to how we are, our behavior is, and how we are trying to show that we are also communicating with them even without saying a word. So first is eye contact. This is the first thing that a person will notice if you are going to talk to him or her. Eye contact is when a speaker looks at a listener. The speaker is signaling that he or she is requesting feedback or wants the listener to take the floor. Okay, well, pagka sinabi nating eye contact, automatically there is the motioning of looking at the listener or the speaker. Meaning to say, your look by the gesture of looking, you are already conveying a particular message that you would like the listener to interpret. Okay? Now, when a listener looks at and slightly up at the speaker, the listener is signaling that he or she wants the floor. So, kana palang daan, wala kayong sinasabing salita. But then there again is conversation through eye contact. And that is an example of a nonverbal cue. You're not saying anything, but because of the way you're looking at each other, then there is no meaning or there is no a conveying of the message that you would like him or her to listen or you would like him or her to take the floor. Okay, kasi nga you're looking. Say for example, you are introducing somebody to speak in front. Of course, when you're introducing somebody to speak in front, as much as possible, you try to look at the person, especially when you introduce him or her. Kasi nga, that will indicate that you are now wanting that person to take the floor. Okay, that person to now become the one speaking in front of the group or in front of the class. Kaya nga eye contact is very, very important, especially when we do classes. Right? For example, on my end, it's very difficult, or it was very difficult, and kumbaga nabaguhan ko during the online classes because I cannot see my students. I can only see my screen in my computer. And that is something that is very new to me and very different. Kumbaga, dili siya lisod class because you can always speak in front of a gadget. No, we do it all the time with our cell phones. Pero when you're teaching one good or when you're talking in a class, it is very essential that you get to see the reaction of your listeners as well. Mona, I try to ask you, and I always emphasize that you open your cameras because I still wanted to have that, you know, kana bitaw monitoring whether or not you are listening. Kaya sa klase bitaw dili man pwede nga maghigda-higda ka, magduko-duko ka or magdungo-dungo ka, motioning that you are resting your head. Meaning to say, eye contact is essential in the conversation or in the communication process because that is where you are also trying to convey a particular intent to the speaker or to the listener. Mo ganina sometimes when you even when you speak personally with people, magstoryahan na mo, tapos na lahi imong ginastorya sa lahi sa communicate sa imong mata. Meaning to say the eye contact there is telling you something differently com- in contrast to what you are saying. Or for example, pagkasigahan nagi kag mata, that could only mean one thing. It's either nakuratan or nasuko sa imuha trying to give you a signal. Okay? So that's the use of an eye contact. An eye contact is also used when a speaker looks away or avoids eye contact from a listener who wishes to take the floor. The speaker is suppressing the listener's attempt to take the floor. So, as I've said, eye contact is used to affirm or to negate from a particular communication or from a particular conversation. It could be that your eye contact is not really looking the person in the eye literally, but your eye contact is looking away, no, because you're trying to avoid the eye contact from the listener. This is something that is commonly happening kapag ka oral recitation na gani. Tapos pag muingon na gani ang teacher, okay, who wants to answer number one? Wala din, magduko-duko na yun, maglingi-lingi din sa likod, trying not to look at the eye of the teacher. Kaya kung imong tanaw ng mata sa teacher, ikaw mo gimatawagan ana. Di ba? Dagan kay guilty sa to ani ini kato face-to-face classes. Even we as teachers, no, when our heads would say, okay, what is the so on and so forth. Pag wala gani ni kabalo sa answer, well, we also do this kind of looking away or avoiding eye contact with the speaker, no, in order for us not to be or in order for us not to get the attention of the speaker. But here's a technique. Kapag ka you are a speaker, you're talking in front, para mawala inyuhang kanabitang consciousness or stage fright as we call it. You look not in the eye of the person, but instead, you look at the forehead of the person. How saan na siya, sir? Magtungok ni sa agtang? No. Try to put it into a scenario class. Imagine yourself, you're in front of an audience. You're in front of the class trying to give a report. Diba? That's common. That's happening all the time in school. You're in front of the class giving a report. Now you have stage fright because you lack confidence. What do you do now para mawala imong stage fright? Sir, I must muster the confidence to speak in front. Okay, I get that. But how do we do that? How do we actually, do that? So mustering the confidence, etc., etc. Here's a technique you can follow. You can look at the eyes, or you can, in order to establish eye contact still, you may look at the forehead of the person that you're talking in front. This is something I learned from a convention or a seminar I attended in Midsayap. They had this kanang training bitaw, workshop, wherein I joined the radio broadcasting. Karon sa radio broadcasting, naa ditoy technique, communication cues nga gitudlo sa mua nga we can choose to not look at the eye per se kay para dili may ma-conscious. Instead, we can look at the forehead. Muna ako class when I'm doing face-to-face classes, lectures, when I give talks in seminars, etc. I don't look at the eyes. It's either I'm looking at your hair or I'm looking at your forehead. Kasi nga, sometimes, even if you're so used to speaking in front, there are instances that you get stage fright. Nga ka na bitang ma-conscious ka kung nindot ba akong buhok, taba ba akong sinina, dili ba kayo ko, unsa ba, nindot ba ang kong angle when you are talking there in front? So eye contact establishes the confidence or shows no the consciousness of a particular individual. So for you to establish that you are in control of the moment, you are the one in the with the authority kasi nga you're in front, then you establish eye contact, a firm eye contact. How do you do that? One way of doing that or one technique of doing that is looking at the forehead. Kaya mo tanaw ka sa ba, awkward bang kayo, maklaro man, yan itanaw ka sa ba sa tao. So you look at the forehead. Pero when you are the listener, of course, it is a guarantee that you're going to be looking, one of the first that you're going to look at is the eyes. And then secondly, ako, I am the one listening, I'm the one sitting and listening to a speaker. I look at the mouth of the speaker kasi I try to remember unsa to yung giyaw-yaw, unsa to yung pag-pronounce ato. So I try to focus my attention on the looking at the mouth of the speaker while trying to listen to the discussion being made by the speaker. Another nonverbal cue that we can use is head shaking. We all use this all the time. Head shaking indicates that the listener wants the speaker to stop talking. Kasi nga, when you shake your head, the common connotation of that gesture is that you are now confused. Sa mga ginaingon sa speaker, uy, kung dili gani mag-abot imong kilay sa tunga, you shake your head. Ay, mali yun na yung giingon. Ay, wa dyo ko kasabot siyang istorya. Pwede mo hunong na lang ni siya og istorya. So that's the indication, no? Head shaking is indicating that you wanted the speaker to stop talking. Okay? Next, raising the index finger. So what is the index finger? The index finger is your tudlo, sa Bisaya pa. Your pointing hand. This signals that the speaker is not finished speaking or that the listener would like to say something. When you're talking, when you're in a conversation, it's either you raise your hand or you raise your index finger. Up, 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 up. No, what I mean is this and that and so on and so forth. Or can I say something? Sometimes you use your index finger or you raise your hand. That's one way of signaling that it's either you're not yet finished talking, let me finish first, or can I say something, Mr. Speaker? Kasi nga, you are either the speaker or the listener in that exchange. Another is leaning back. When you lean back, no, this signals that the speaker is done talking or is now yielding the floor. Okay? For example, when you're listening to a particular individual talk, tapos padulong na siya sa conclusion, there are now verbal cues leading to the conclusion. You now somehow try to lean back a little bit. When you lean back, that's giving the signal that the speaker is almost done or done talking and or he or she is now yielding the floor. When we talk about yielding the floor, about to take or about to exit the floor, okay, when the speaker is finished discussing or talking, so that is relatable with your teachers. For example, you are listening to this discussion, unya you are face to face with your laptop, so galingkod kag insakto karon you are glued to the screen trying to listen to the speaker as well what the teacher is talking about, no? When the teacher signals now that he or she is now towards the end of the discussion and you are able to understand the lesson, you somehow lean back. That shows, no, that the speaker is done talking or pahumanay na siya istorya diha. Okay? So these are, or that is an example of a nonverbal cue that we do or that is being observed in a particular communication. So you have their eye contact, you have head shaking, or you have nodding. Nodding is also an example of a verbal cue. Labi na when you are really able to grasp, no, the message or the lesson that the speaker is trying to say. No? So makakuan jud ka nga, yes, tama. Ay, okay, kasabot ko. Ana. So nodding or head shaking is either affirmation or negation from the contentions made or the comprehensions that the speaker would like you to have. Okay. And then you also raising the index finger. It's signaling two things that you are not yet finished speaking or you would like to say something in response to what is being or what is being said by the speaker. Leaning back, as I've said, is when you are about to finish talking or you're now going to relax a little bit. Okay. Here's an example. Try to put it into a scenario or put it into a context that you are a student leader. You are talking to a group of younger students about an upcoming school project. While you're speaking, one of the students leans forward and opens her mouth, signaling that she has something to say. Sir, dili ba dapat erase niya yung hand? That could be. That could be, but then again, by the gesture of leaning forward and motioning to open her mouth, that could already give you the signal, no, that this particular student wants to say something in response to the explanation that you are making or to the talk that you are giving about an upcoming school project. So that's an example of a nonverbal cue where you can observe, no, how a particular individual, no, is trying to give response or interest to what you are talking about. Okay. Now, in social interactions class, always remember that an exchange takes place between two or among individuals for social fulfillment. Okay, example, hi Kel. Hey Jacob, nice to see you. How are you? I'm fine. I would like to join. Would you like to join us this afternoon? The members of the design committee will plan the stage design at the students' lounge. I'd love to join you, but I have enrichment classes after dismissal. If my classes finish early, I can drop by. That's all right. Let me know beforehand. Let's exchange numbers so that we can keep in touch. So this is an example of yung sinabi nga na in a social interaction, an exchange takes place for social fulfillment. Okay, so this knows or this discussion is between two friends, no, who would like to take part of being part of the design committee of a particular school program, etc., etc. But then again, makita ni mo diri in their conversation that there is fulfillment in the way they interact with one another. Okay, now here is a question that I would like to raise to the group. As a member of the family, how would you use control and social interaction as functions of communication in establishing and maintaining a harmonious relationship with your parents and siblings? This is something that is common to us. Every day we communicate with family members, no? But then again, do we really know how to communicate well with them that we are able to establish and maintain a harmonious relationship with our parents and our siblings and other members of the family? Kaya sometimes, how kita mo storya sa itong mga friends, pero pag abot sa balay, we don't know how to deal, no, with family members. Hence, the causing or the cause of family miscommunications, misunderstandings, mga kahiubos, etc., etc. So, with learning social control or with learning control and regulation as well as social interaction as functions of communication, how can we establish now, no, and maintain a harmonious relationship with our parents and siblings? That's something that I want you to reflect on and I want you to think through. Bitaw, no? Unsaon bitaw nako na, no? Sige raman mig-away sa kong mama, sir, kay magsige raman kong tubag siya, ha? Hindi mo siya kasabot, good sir, nga mauni. Now, by understanding how control and regulation helps in the conversation, no, as well as social interaction, how can you establish that again? Re-establishing the communication, the good communication, healthy communication with your family. Pwede nga, usbunin mo na siya. Ikaw ang mag-initiate, ana, given that you're the younger, perhaps you're the younger member of the family, or when it is with the context of your family, or with your parents, mas magawang magina sila sa. So you try to re-establish a relationship, a communication with your parents through control and regulating how you react, how you understand their messages and their contentions, and by knowing what is the social interaction in the family. Sir, practical kay mi sir, dili kay mi cheesy. Or kung magstoryahan na man mi sir, dili kay mi anang, sa ba, flowery words, sweet gestures, etc., etc. Kay awkwardan ko sir. Okay, then you establish it with that note. You try to identify, no, what is the interaction within the family so that uh, you may be able to know kung say possible usage, no, of or say functions of communication na inyong gamiton in trying to decipher, no, how to best efficiently communicate with the members of your family. Okay. Now, here is an assignment that I would like you to answer in your notebook. Okay. Think of all the communication instances that you have experienced today. Choose one. Okay. It could be uh, fa- uh, in this particular conversation, you are going to determine the functions such as control or social interaction that you think is significant. Recall the whole conversation and put it in writing. Make sure that even nonverbal cues are also included. Then, make an analysis by focusing on how communication was used in the flow of conversation. Was it for regulation or was it for social interaction? Okay, you may go back into this lesson, into the study guide, no, and trying to analyze regulation too or social interaction. Okay. And then afterwards, I want you to write at least 3 sentences analysis in your notebooks. So you first start with your conversation. You, of course, kabaw naman ta how to make a conversation, no? You write there kinsay kastorya nimo o sa inyong istoryahan, etc., etc. You may also use nonverbal cues that that you can recall that were used, no, in that particular conversation. And then afterwards, try to make a 3 sentence analysis of the flow of conversation as to how communication was used. Was it for regulation or was it for social interaction? Okay. And then I want you to write it in your notebook. Supposedly, in your notebooks, with the tasks and assessments that I've asked, at least naana mo'y napulo ka buok nga nasuwat sa iyong notebook. Kung at this point, no, wala pa mo'y nasuwat maski isa, go ahead and you try to go back with the modules because mostly I'm asking you to answer the assessment materials in the study guide or lessons that I assign in Quipper in your notebooks as well. Kaya para naapod mo again, for transparency purposes, ba nga sir, naka-answer ko anak mo niya ako answer. And then in your notebooks, there should be no erasures. Kaya para kay bawo ko nga wala ka nag-usab-usab og answer nimo para perfect ang score. Again, this is trying to assess whether or not sa sugod sa lesson, mao ni ato ang nasabtan, paghuman sa lesson, mao na ni ang atong nahibalaan. Okay? That's the purpose of why I am wanting you to write your answers in your notebook so that you can also assess your progress in the lecture and the lessons that we are giving or that we're having, as well as the karabitang lessons in Quipper that you are studying during asynchronous classes. So always remember, class, na when we do asynchronous classes or when you are assigned a particular activity that you are going to do during asynchronous classes, it's not for you to relax and chill nga why klase. It's for you to still manage your time, no, in trying to do the task given to you, okay, during those periods. Kaya para dili mo ma-pressure nga kailangan isubmit dayon or unsa ba or kailangan, you're given the time to study according to your own pace during those periods. So please do not think, ay kaduha ra bitaw na magklase, etc., etc. Again, we are trying to make sure that the online platform where we are having our classes isn't a burden. Hence, it is an opportunity for us to not only learn but also to enjoy the time that we have, with our family. So, dili naman mi nagapundo kayong balay kay mulaag naman mi. Again, that's your prerogative. But in school, mo ni itong kailangan i-accomplish. Mo ni ato ang gi-target nga objective so that dili kayo bugat sa inyo, ha. Okay? So, if there are any questions that may arise during this study, you may raise it to me in the group chat that we have, or you may message it to me in Quipper chat boxes or chat rooms. Thank you very much for joining me in this lecture. I hope to see you in class the next time around.